Good morning, everybody. Of course, you know, the word of the phrase of the year is "you're on mute." So I have unmuted myself. If I could just ask that maybe in the chat box you can post if you're able to hear me. My name is Richard. I'm the Managing Director, CEO, head honcho and chief dishwasher at Baker Baines. But today we've got some really important information to share with you. I'm going to minimize my camera because you didn't log on to see me. You specifically logged on to see my screen. So I really just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. If I could just ask that you can put anything you want into the chat box. I'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation into the chat box specifically. But thank you very much for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about Autodesk's extension of the multi-user trade-in and what that means for organizations who are transitioning from a multi-user environment into a named user environment. It's fairly complex. Unfortunately, some of these license model adjustments were planned long before COVID, and then their timing might not feel great, but we still need to see the end of these. Autodesk have, however, been fairly generous, or rather conscious of what their customers are going through, and have adjusted the period. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. It's 2 minutes past 10 according to my watch, let's get cracking. So from an agenda perspective, I'm going to talk about what is changing and why. I'm going to talk about what are the benefits of the named user environment, what is the multi-user trade-in offer, and more specifically, what are the next steps. For us, it's important that you know the facts. Our responsibility is to make sure that you're informed. We are not in a position to advise you whether we think you should go one particular way or the other, because it's about your organization and where your organization is in this license model transition. So firstly, my name is Richard. I'm the CEO, as I've already said. I've been in the Autodesk industry for more years than my youthful good looks would have you believe. Roughly 20 years of Autodesk experience, predominantly solving problems for customers and trying to make customers happy within the framework that we're afforded from an Autodesk perspective. A fun fact about me is that when I was born, my surname was Baines. Baines is my father's surname, and Smedley Williams is my mom. But you can understand now a little bit about where the name Baker Baines comes from. So all of you know who Baker Baines is. I really literally want to just take 30 seconds to really show you that we're about a lot more than just your Autodesk software. We do business process improvement consulting. We do survey and design hardware. So those things like reality capture and scan to BIM, very exciting right now. We do design software and we consult on design software, and we implement it and we support it and we train it. And we train it using a blended learning approach. And Baker Baines is now 6 years old. We're incredibly proud of our success. But of course, our success is all attributed to our customers. These are the brands that we represent. Sorry, I'm going to take this off. It's probably very noisy and incredibly warm all of a sudden. So we became a BE level 1 contributor at the beginning of this fiscal year. We are accredited by Autodesk from a consulting perspective and the service provider perspective. We represent Topcon and Leica from a reality capture and a BIM, a scan to BIM perspective. We represent Autodesk, IDAS, ClearEdge, and Adobe from a design software perspective. And we represent CAD Learning, and we're an Autodesk authorized training center in South Africa. So those are our credentials in terms of for those of you on the call that we maybe haven't had a chance to meet before. I would like an opportunity to hear from you in terms of these changes on the multi-user environment and the 2-for-1 trade-in promotion. I'm not going to launch a specific poll, but I would like you to just pop into the chat box, whether it's A, it's great, you're excited about what it means for your business, B, you're confused, C, you're frustrated, or D, you couldn't really care. So if I could just ask that you pop those messages into the chat box. To get to the chat box, you click on chat. There's a little triangle that drops down. And I see Mangaliso, you have already said B, so you're a bit confused, and that's good. Mangaliso, we're going to unpack that for you today. Maurits, you've also said you're confused. Sure. But it sounds to me like confusion reigns, which wouldn't be a surprise given how complex Autodesk's environment can be from time to time. I'm going to give it literally 30 more seconds for somebody else to drop in an answer. We've got, you'll notice that we haven't invited our entire customer base. We've actually only invited a select group of customers for whom this program is still relevant. So if I could just ask, maybe I'm just looking for one more answer. Stephen, if you wouldn't mind dropping in an answer, or maybe Utumuleng, if you wouldn't mind dropping in an answer, it would be great. So overall, thanks, Stephen. Okay, so confusion seems to be the word of the day. Let me see if I can help clarify things for you. What's changing and why? Well, specifically, we're turning a corner from a pandemic perspective, and many of our customers are more prepared to transition to named user. But let's just stop there for a minute and rewind. A few years ago, Autodesk announced a shift from a multi-user environment towards named users. The reason why they wanted to move towards named users is because globally, from a research perspective, there are 1.8 users per multi-user license. Multi-users are a lot more expensive. And if you have a named user environment, much like your Netflix account, your banking profile, it means that Autodesk is really able to start to understand more about you and your usage from a software perspective. So this transition started a while ago, and Autodesk then announced a certain time frame, and now they have extended that time frame. So they announced an extended time frame in February of this year, and that was because they are cognizant of what has happened from a COVID perspective. Basically, I think it was May of last year was when the first program became live. Customers were told that they had the option to trade in their multi-user license and get 2 named users for the same price of their multi-user, but they had to do it at their first renewal period, which put quite a lot of pressure onto customers who maybe were dealing with other things at the same time from a COVID perspective. And because globally the research is 1.8 users per 1 multi-user license, that Autodesk felt that it would be fairly straightforward to start that transition. But Autodesk is actually a fairly conservative organization, and what I mean by that is they take a long time to implement these sorts of changes, and they don't often lead the design industry. They're often, maybe second mover or third mover. They weren't the first software organization to move into the subscriptions environment. They're not the first design software organization to move from a multi-user into a named user environment. But the move from multi-user to named user pose other kinds of challenges, which is about helping customers make sure that you've got the right software. So what they then said in February was that they have extended this program up until the 7th of August 2023, which takes a lot of pressure off all of you, which was specifically what we wanted to talk about today. Now, there are a bunch of benefits from a named user perspective. The first is around dedicated access. So, you know, me as an individual, I can log onto my computer at work, I can log into my computer at home, and the system knows my information. It knows what I'm needing to use. It's much like your Netflix account. You know, in the past, you used to have access to home user license access, and I think in the world of flexibility, and certainly in the world of COVID, a shift towards named user has been actually very beneficial, because for those customers who are needing to have their staff dial in on a VPN or share a license that was a network license, but everybody was working from home, it became fairly complicated. It also is an opportunity to optimize license costs. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, for us, it's an opportunity to help assess your usage and to make sure that you have least cost licensing. The reason for that is if you have an AEC collection, but you've only got one person accessing Revit, does that person need access to a full AEC collection? Maybe not. Maybe they only need, and do they even need full Revit? Maybe they only need Revit LT. So for us, it's an opportunity to re-look at the structure of your organization and see, does everybody have what they need? And then to try to figure out, if they don't have what they need, how do we give them what they need, and how best to structure that. Lastly, it's also around plans for individuals, because whilst the software is shipped to you in it, most of it is shipped to you in a collection. Most customers only really make use of 3 or so licenses out of a collection. And some people have a full collection where they only access 1 license. And from a usage perspective, Autodesk are going to be able to start to see what is the best plan for that individual, and how do we work with that individual as part of a greater organization to deliver on the expectations that you as the organization have. So this multi-user trade-in offer, at your next renewal before the 7th of August 2023, you have the option to trade in your 1 multi-user license or network maintenance seat, because remember, the one is the subscription platform and the other is the perpetual platform, for 2 standard subscriptions, each at a similar suggested retail price for what you're paying for your existing license. So in an example of where maybe you have 20 multi-user subscriptions, you can trade them in for 40 named users and then renew that at an ongoing discount until 2028. So Autodesk is purposefully going to keep that price discounted so that you get more value out of your investment. It's important to note though, if you have 20 multi-user subscriptions and you only need 30 named user licenses, then you can just renew 15 of them, because this is now about trying to get you what you actually need and avoid an environment of over licensing. You know, we've seen over the course of the last year, not only with the impact of COVID and those kinds of things, but where organizations have said, okay, so we need to have access for X amount of people. We have X amount of multi-user licenses. We don't need to trade in all of our multi-user licenses, and you can let them lapse. Or some organizations are choosing to keep a small contingency available for them for when they maybe scale up again. The point is, it's about trying to give you what you need when you need it. There are a couple of things that are important to note. What if I don't take the multi-user network trade-in offer before the 7th of August 2023? Well, maintenance plans retire on the 7th of May this year, and you're not able to renew those maintenance plans. Those maintenance plans are related to the perpetual license environment. Subscriptions with multi-user access retire on the 7th of August 2022. Now, what we're able to do is we're able to, if each of you get in contact with my staff, we're able to tell you exactly what license you have and what decision needs to be made by when. So it's quite good value for money, but there is a precursor to this exercise, I think, which is for organizations that have a lot of people. So I'm talking about, 15 to 20 staff or more. It's important to review what your needs are. So we're happy to do a usage assessment for you. It's not a charged activity, but if we're able to do a user assessment and then try and help you gear up for this trading to get the most out of it. A couple of other things that you should note. If you've got one multi-user and you're going to trade it in for 2 licenses, but you only need 1, you're not going to be able to pay half. That's kind of not necessarily how it works. So you've got, there is a 2-for-1 ratio, but for all of you who deal with Julie in my office or Abby in my office, you'd be able to, they'll be able to advise you very specifically on what has to be done by when. There is an important notice, which is that the multi-user trade-in offer price increases by 5% in dollars on the 7th of May 2021. And that 5% increase does not apply to customers trading in full multi-user subscriptions. The trade-in price will be lower than renewing their multi-user subscription. Basically, what this is saying is, as per previous years, Autodesk do a global price adjustment for the renewals on the 5th of May, on the 7th of May. And often it's in the region of about 5%, and it's a dollar-based price. If you've got a subscription that's due for renewal up until about the 5th of August, because you can renew something 90 days prior, you should be having a conversation with someone in my office and trying to figure out how you can avoid that price increase. So I'm now going to open it up for questions, because I'm not entirely sure if that answered the questions, that if that made it any clearer for those people who had said that they're a bit confused. In short, if you've got a multi-user license, you're not going to be able to continue to renew that multi-user license for very much longer. If that multi-user license comes from a maintenance perpetual environment, the options run out in May of this year. If that multi-user license comes from a subscription environment, the options run out in August of next year. Each of you have got different license requirements, and each of you have got a different licensing setup. I'm very happy to have one-on-ones with each of you to discuss, okay, so you've got X amount of people and X amount of licenses. It does put pressure on each of you individually to understand what the requirements of your users are. So where we're dealing with an organization of maybe more than 20 people, as I've mentioned, a user assessment, I think, is critical, because otherwise, gone are the days where you would just have a pool of licenses available for use. You've got to try to find a more flexible kind of way of doing things. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. You can, if you want to ask questions specifically, you can pop them in the chat box, and I'm happy to take questions now. Okay. So Mangliso, in the named license environment, they cannot share licenses. It is, it works on an email address. So you log in with your credentials. So Mangaliso Dlamini at customerx.co.za would be your license login. Mine would be, Richard.Smedley-Williams at so-and-so. So you can't share licenses anymore. Named licensing is exactly that. It is a license attached to a person as opposed to attached to a serial number. Does that answer your question? Maurits, yes, in short, you can change your multi-user license to single user licenses. That trade-in offer is at the first trade-in, it's 2 for 1. So, or actually it's 1 for 2 technically. So you trade in your 1 multi-user license and you can get 2 named users for that. So if you've got 4 multi-user licenses or network licenses, as it's also known, if you've got 4, you can trade it in for 8. Does that answer your question? I hope it does. Who else has got questions while I'm addressing them? Great, thank you, Maurits. Mangaliso, did that answer your question? Yes, Mangaliso. If you've got 2 shared users, 2 shared licenses for 10 users, you need 10 named licenses. But, Mangaliso, and this is a very important but, we can help you understand what the usage patterns of those 10 users are. So for example, do those of your 2 shared licenses, let's say you had an AutoCAD and an AEC collection on a network. Do all of those people need AutoCAD, or do they need AutoCAD and Civil 3D? Do they need AutoCAD, Civil 3D and Navisworks? Do they only need AutoCAD LT? This is where that concept of a user assessment is absolutely critical. A user assessment for us will take about a half a day. It's not a paid for exercise. Basically, we need to have a discussion with each of the users. So you need to know who the 10 users are. And, because you have people who make use of the software every day, and then you have people who make use of the software every month, and then you have people who make use of the software every 2 to 3 months. Now, gone are the days where organizations have the amount of money to pay or to provide for a license for someone who only uses it once every 90 days. That's not cost effective. So what I would suggest to you, Mangaliso, is let's have a conversation and do a user assessment for you. Stephen asked the question, with named users, is it easy to delete or reallocate in case employees leave the company? Absolutely. So that is done by the Autodesk administrator. Whoever in your company is the Autodesk administrator on the portal, literally you just go and take away a license and assign it to somebody else. Itumeleng has asked, why has this implementation not been done before? I mean, if you think about it, like you said, not every user or utilizes all the Autodesk products. Itumeleng, I'm not able to answer on behalf of Autodesk's global strategy, but I think that it has a lot to do with the Autodesk environment is very complex because the types of problems that we solve are very complex. No one design software is going to solve every problem that a customer has. And if we go back in history from an Autodesk perspective, they started introducing suites quite a few years ago, but that was when we were in a perpetual environment. Now they moved to a subscription environment, and they've moved to a subscription environment as well as a more consumption-based model. So I think that maybe the world wasn't ready for it. It's not an easy adjustment, and I can't say that every customer that we talk to is happy about it. But I've got one client who I was chatting to prior to this call. They're a fairly large architectural firm with offices in Cape Town and in Johannesburg. And she absolutely loves subscriptions. She thinks that it's the easiest thing because she can literally just give someone a license and take it away as and when she needs it. And she likes that flexibility. And, in the perpetual environment, there was a very high cost to entry, whereas in the subscription environment, it's not the same. So I can't speak as to why it's not been done before, but I hope that that gives you some context. What happens if a user shares their credentials on another computer for activation? Well, Mangaliso, Autodesk are clever. They track those logins, and at some point in time, they would be having a license compliance conversation with you. If a user shares their credentials on another computer for activation, the user most likely wouldn't be held accountable, but the organization absolutely would be held accountable, and they would most likely find themselves in a compliance conversation with Autodesk, which is handled separately by the name of a lady by the name of Susan Moremi handles license compliance. Autodesk, I mean, I suppose it's the same as what happens if a user shares their credentials on you know, on Netflix or on the banking profile. Certain devices need to be activated for those types of services to be used. I don't know that Autodesk are at device activation component yet, but I guess it would depend on ethically what it is that the user is wanting to achieve. Who else has got questions? Okay, so I'm not hearing any more questions from anybody. This presentation will be available on our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. But what I would like to hear from you before we go is just to check in. You know, everybody said that they were confused at the start of this webinar. I'd really like to just get an understanding of, you know, do you feel more empowered? Do you feel clearer on the adjustments that Autodesk are going through? If I could just ask that you pop the answer A, B, C, or D. Are you still confused about these changes? Are you frustrated? Are you excited about what it means for your business? Are you not interested? Or maybe E, do you feel much better? So if you wouldn't mind just popping the answer into the chat box, specifically Mangaliso, Maurits, Stephen, and Itumeleng, since each of you had answered the questions previously. It would be great for me to just know, like, if we've helped demystify the already slightly complicated environment. Okay, so Mangaliso is frustrated. Mangaliso, I'm very happy to have a conversation with you separately about this. I think that you wouldn't be the only customer that has felt frustrated by this, but I promise you that if we break it down one thing at a time, I think you might find that from an IT perspective, it's a lot easier to administer. Maurits, I'm really glad that you're excited about what it means for your business. Stephen and Itumeleng, and maybe even Nico, any other answers that you might want to venture? Just curious, would be nice to hear from you if you don't mind. While that's busy happening, as I mentioned, this is going to be available on our YouTube channel. So if you don't already subscribe to our YouTube channel, go and subscribe and click the notify button so that you know when we have updated something. And from a next steps perspective, really it's about review your software licenses, because the licenses that you have available to you are, well, everyone's are different. So have a chat to us about your Autodesk account if you need any help. I would strongly encourage you to assess your licensing situation and your needs, because just because you have 10 users, to use Mangaliso's example, just because you have 10 users doesn't mean that they all need the same thing at the same time for the same duration of time. And I think that it would be very useful to do a user assessment. So you assess your needs. You should also assess your environment at the same time in terms of the way in which people make use of the licensing. Is there do they bring a laptop to work and take it home, that kind of thing? Engage with us, because we can help you understand the different scenarios, and then take the relevant action, because much like with anything, there's a limited amount of time that you can take action. in these licenses, or rather in this license environment. Thank you, Tumeleng. I'm glad that you feel a lot better about how you feel about things. I'm going to bring the webinar to a close, everybody. I'd like to thank you all for your time. I know that at the moment there's probably a fair amount of webinar fatigue, so thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and learning with us about these adjustments. And here are our contact information. Most of you already have my cell phone number if any of you want to chat about the licenses. Please also remember you can touch base with Abigail or Julie, whoever is your customer retention specialist. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a good day.